In today's video, I'm going to be sewing up the Jules bag, and this is from Lacus. I have so many of her patterns on my channel, and this is the one she just came out with most recently. This is a nice size bag, has a lot of structure. I would call it a medium size bag. Definitely maybe more of an intermediate sew just because of a couple of spots on it. I'm going to go through all the steps of how to sew this pattern. This will probably be one of my longer tutorials just because I want to walk through everything slowly so that by the end of this video, along with the pattern, you will be able to sew up this bag easily. Before we get started sewing, let's just look at some of the features. We have a zipper pocket on the front as well as one on the back. We have this zip closure on the top. When we open it up, that is our main opening, and you can see very deep. Let me get in there so you can see how deep that opening is. We have a slip pocket on the side, and we have a zipper pocket on the other side. So if you're someone who likes the shape of this bag like I do, we are going to walk through everything so that you can feel confident about sewing it without any problems. So before I jump into actual sewing, we're going to talk about some prep work. I'm going to leave this bag out for a little bit so that I can kind of point out the things we're working on. The first thing I want to talk about is the handles. Let's go ahead and look at how we're going to do the handles. You could choose to use webbing for your handles and webbing for your handle connector. On the tester versions that I saw, some people have this a contrast, some people had it matching this piece. Some people had these both the same color, but then had this and this different. So many different options to do this. So for this version and the one I'm going to be sewing up now, I have both of these parts the same. And then I have these and my side to be matching. So for the handles, I'm using a cotton woven. You can use webbing. If you're using cotton woven, what you're going to do is you're going to take the pattern piece, cut it on the fold, and then go ahead and do a four-way fold, top stitch down both sides. I went ahead and folded the edges under. That will be what will connect. You'll slip it onto that connector at the very end of the bag. This will be the last thing you do. So while I have this prepped now, I won't use it again until the very end. If you're using webbing, you really don't need to do anything unless you just wanted to fold down your edges. So that is going to be the two handles or straps on this bag. Let's talk about these connectors. We'll need 4 connectors. We only need 2 handles, but 4 connectors. So your pattern piece will have it looking like this. This is a cotton woven, and I do have a medium weight interfacing on the back, and I did draw a line down the center. All I'm going to do is I'm going to fold these raw edges to the center line, just like this. So that has that seam there on the back. On the front, you do not see anything. Then I slip on one of my rectangle rings, and then I fold it down. The pattern tells you exactly how much to fold it down. We will add this at a little bit later of a step, but you can see it's going to go right like this, and then at the very end, the straps will connect on there. So I go ahead and prep all 4 of these. I wanted to show you how this one looked before I prepped it, but all my other ones are already prepped. I will go off camera and prep this one also. Don't sew anything on it yet, just have it folded. I used a glue stick to kind of keep mine pressed flat, but you could also use double-sided tape if you prefer. So 4 of these, 4 connectors. The next thing I want to work on is the side pieces. You're going to have 2 exterior and 2 lining. For my exterior, I'm using a print for Merino, and this one I have a cotton woven, and then I have an interface with a medium weight interfacing like an SF101. I also added a non-woven stabilizer like a Decaville Light, and then also a smaller piece of fleece or Thermolan. Now I kept the fleece and the Decaville Light out of the seam allowance. You don't need to add both. You could only do one if you wanted to. Where mine is a cotton woven, I just wanted a little bit of extra structure on the side pieces. For the lining pieces, this is a print from Jane R. Edwards. It is a cotton woven also, and I'm just adding a medium weight interfacing like SF101 on the back of this. For this step, I'm going a little bit out of order for the pattern. This is meant to be done later, but if you've watched my other tutorials, you know I like to get as many pieces combined as possible at the beginning just to help me feel a little bit more organized and like I'm getting a good start on the pattern. So what I'll do for both of these pieces is I will place my exterior and my lining piece wrong sides together, and then I'm just going to baste all around so that this is one piece. Since we're doing this, that does mean that I'm going to be binding parts of this bag. So there will be binding around the sides here, and then there will be a little bit of binding at the bottom. I'm going to baste an exterior side and lining wrong sides together with just an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera angle from here on out so you can be looking down and seeing a better view of what I'm doing. Here's how the two side pieces look, my exterior and the lining. I'm going to set these two pieces aside until we need them later. I'm going to pull out 3 different pattern pieces and 2 zippers. So this is our top panel piece. We only have 2 exterior pieces here. They both just have a medium weight interfacing like a SF101 on them. Then I'm going to pull out 2 pocket panel pieces. Again, only 2 exteriors, same interfacing. And then I have 2 exterior pocket panel pieces. These are the pieces that's going to make up this front pocket piece. So here will be the top, here will be the pocket panel. When you open it up, that will be where you will see that lining piece. You can see that my bag stands up well on its own, but it can be smushed down easily. It bounces back and I have no problems with the structure. I am making this version the same as this version. I do find that there is some bulky spots in this bag. If you are working on a domestic machine like I am, I don't suggest you adding anything else to these pieces unless you keep it out of the seam allowance. So if you wanted to add a fleece or a Decaville light, that's fine. You could do it. Just make for sure it stays out of your seam allowance. That bottom of the bag, when we bind it, it is very bulky there. So what we're going to do is just kind of like a traditional zipper pocket. So I'm going to set that top piece aside, and I'm going to work on this pocket lining piece first. So this is the lining. I'm just going to place my zipper tape on here, and I'm going to baste an 1/8 of an inch away. I'm using a number 5 piece of zipper tape. You could use number 3 if that's your preference. I do not have a zipper pull on this yet. I will do that after I have this sewn up. I'm going to grab out my pocket panel piece. This is the way I want it to look at the end. I want the print going this way. My print's not so much directional, but I do have a preference of how I want it to go. So the way it's going to look here, I'm going to place it right sides together with that lining, matching up this top edge, making sure I have these sides lined up as well. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I want to sew all across that top edge, and I'm going to make sure I use the full seam allowance given in the pattern. As you would expect, I'm going to go ahead and flip these apart, and then I'm going to top stitch. I'm just going to take a moment to press everything flat. When I'm top stitching, I'm going to be an 1/8 of an inch away from that seam, and I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping everything laying flat, having some tension on this so that things don't creep up, especially the lining in the back. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this lining bottom and pull it up here to the top. So let's flip it over and just slip that up. Make sure you keep it in line on the sides, and then you're again going to baste that into place. Here's how it'll look from the front. Here's from the back. You can see that lining is inside there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one of these top panel pieces. Let me get it orientated the way I want. Yes, I want it this way. So this is the way I want it to look. So I'm just going to flip it down so that it's right sides together with this other exterior piece. Again, match up those sides and the top. This time you're going to sew with that full seam allowance one more time. Once you have that seam sewed, go ahead and just flip up this top panel piece. Your seam allowance will be staying up, and your lining on the inside back here will be staying down. Pull this back over to your machine, top stitch again. This is what that front pocket looks like. It's going to be this piece right here. I'm going to go ahead and go off camera, add my zipper pull on here, and then if you wanted, you could go ahead and baste down these sides. I'm not too worried about basting them down right now because I know I will be doing it again here in just a minute. But if you want to, go ahead and baste down the sides, but put your pull on first if you don't already have it. I'm going to repeat those same steps to do the other zipper pocket that goes here on the back. So I'm going to do both pockets and have them both ready to go for the next step. I have the front and the back completed, these main zipper pocket pieces. We'll still have to add more to the top and the bottom and the sides, but this is where we need to be now. The pattern tells you to have both your zipper pulls going the same way. It is a personal preference, so just make for sure that you have the pulls going the way you want. You can trim up the ends. The next thing we're going to do is make the linings, because the next step will be combining the exteriors and the linings. So let's go ahead and pull out the lining pieces. Here's my 2 lining pieces. I'm just going to have a medium weight interfacing on both of these, and I'm going to make a slip pocket for one and a zipper pocket on the other. This is the print I'm using for my 2 pockets. This is a cotton canvas from K&A Custom Fabrics. I don't have any interfacing on this where it's a cotton canvas and where it's going to end up being a pocket. So for one of them, I'm turning into a slip pocket, so I'll just fold that one right sides together. I'm going to start sewing at the bottom, go up, pivot, break my stitches, and then do the same thing here, sewing here and down. I'm going to back stitch when I start, and when I stop on this piece, just to make sure I lock in those stitches, I'll trim up on the corners just to reduce a little bulk, and then I'll turn it right sides out and top stitch across the top. Just as a side note, before I top stitch, I'm going to kind of pull here to get that flat, those raw edges tucked in there really nice. And then I want to choose which way I like the way this looks, for if I want this the top or this the top. Yeah, I'm going to have this be the bottom and this be the top, just because I like the way that print looks. I'm going to go ahead and pull out a lining piece. And the pattern tells you how far down to place it. I'm going to center it from left to right. And now I'm just going to sew. I'll start at the top and go down, pivot, go back up. So sewing the 3 sides, leaving that top open. Definitely want to back stitch here. Trim up your threads on the top here, and then this lining piece is done. Go ahead and pull out this second one. This one's going to be turned into a zipper pocket. The pattern tells us how far up from the bottom to place this piece. And then she gives you a series of measurements as to where to place your zipper box. I always use this tool from Mormino. I think she still has it on her website. I've had it for years, and this is how I use to make my zipper pockets. So I'm going to go off camera to make my box, and then when I come back, I will sew directly on the lines for that box, cut open the middle, and then push this lining through, and then we will install the zipper. Once you push the zipper pocket lining through, go ahead and have this orientated so that you're looking at the main lining of the bag. I didn't take it over to the iron. I should have, but I just wasn't feeling like getting up at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is I want to take off these clips, and I'm going to have my zipper tape with the pull on it, and I'm going to have the teeth right in the middle of this box, and then I'm just going to slowly stitch 1/8 of an inch all the way around to attach this zipper to the lining. Definitely not the neatest pocket I've ever made, but it's okay. Once you have that zipper attached, go ahead and flip it to the other side. Pull down that top lining piece. It should match up pretty much perfect with the bottom. Press that flat, and now we're going to sew from one side across up. We are not leaving an opening in this zipper pocket because, like I said, we are binding parts of this bag. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over so I'm looking at the lining main side, and then I'm going to sew the pocket shut. I went ahead and trimmed the overhang. It's really not necessary though. It's not going to be in the seam allowance, but I just went ahead and trimmed it. I'm going to pull out the other lining piece and then those 2 exterior pieces that we were working on from earlier. You should have 1 piece of zipper tape left. I'm not going to put the zipper pull on it yet, but I'm going to keep it right here on my sewing machine so I don't forget it. If you know which one you want to be your front, go ahead and grab it first. It doesn't matter to me. Both of them are going to be the same. Doesn't matter to me where the pockets go either. I think I want my zipper pocket to the front though. I don't use zipper pockets typically in a bag, so that's a little easier for me to have it to the front, and the slip pocket I'll just drop things in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my lining right sides up, zipper tape right sides up, just lining it up at the top, and I'm going to baste it into place. You do not need to do this step. You could use clips or double-sided tape if you wanted, and sew all 3 layers at the same time. Here is how that lining looks with the zipper on top. Go ahead and take one of these pieces, flip it over, match up the sides and the top, and we are going to sew this time along that top edge with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. Once you have the exterior and lining sewn together, separate the two by putting them wrong sides together. Flip over to your exterior, and then you're going to top stitch. Pull down, make sure everything's lining up nicely. Keep it flat here with a little bit of tension on it so that everything's going to stay in line. We're going to do a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away. This is how that front exterior and how my lining look. I'm not worried about any overhang at the moment. I'll trim all that up later. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to go off camera and install this back on the top part of this zipper. So my back exterior and my back lining piece are both going to attach to this top zipper portion, and then I'll sew it the exact same way as I did the exterior, and then we'll come back after I have those pieces attached. This is what I have right now. Here's going to be the front, here's going to be the back, here is that main zipper opening. Let's flip this over and look at the lining. I went ahead and basted down the exteriors and the bottom and trimmed everything up. I have all my zipper pulls on. Here is my 2 pockets. Make sure your slip pocket opens at the top. There's your zipper pocket. So everything is like kind of connected there, and so nothing's loose. I'm based a lot in this pattern just because it helps keep everything organized, but it's not necessary. Now we're going to add that bottom piece to this side and then also to the other side. So pull out your 2 bottom pieces for each side. You should have an exterior for both and a lining for both. Go ahead and orientate. I think I want mine this way, so go ahead and have it oriented the way you want. This is my exterior. Here's the bottom of that exterior, so I'm just going to flip it, place it right sides together, match it up on the sides and the bottom. Let's add some clips. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the lining. You can baste these separately if you want to, but I don't feel there's so much a need to do that on this step. So I'm okay with it going this way, so I'll flip it up, adding some clips. So at this point, you're going to be sewing through the 2 base pieces and this main lining exterior piece you have sewn together. I'm going to start at one side, use the full seam allowance, back stitch, and go all the way across to the other end. I'm going to separate these 2. Let me flip back over to the exterior. I always like to top stitch from the exterior. Pull everything nice and snug. And then we are top stitching on this bottom panel piece. The seam allowance should be underneath. What we're going to do now is we are not basting this part yet. Don't baste this closed because chances are you're going to have to trim some of this off. The designer wrote this pattern to accommodate either number 3 or number 5 zippers. You may have a little bit of overhang after we do the next step, so just top stitch and leave this open, and then go ahead and repeat that for the other side. Add the 2 bases on to this other piece here. So we are just extending this, so I'm going to add those 2 base pieces here the same way I did the other side, and then I will come back and we will add the side pieces. Now that I have the bottoms attached to both sides, the front and the back, I'm going to pull out those long side pieces. You should have an exterior and a lining. Both the lining and the exterior are a cotton woven. For the lining, I'm just going to have on just the basic medium weight interfacing like I've been using. But let's talk about how we're doing the exterior. First we use the medium weight interfacing, and then we use a non-woven kind of stabilizer piece like a Decaville Light or equivalent. Then you're going to add another reinforcement piece. You could choose to use Decaville Light, you could choose to use fleece. I actually am using Decaville Heavy on mine for one reason. The designer tells us that at the end we are going to fold this piece back. She tells you can go ahead and take your iron and make a crease on this now. That helps you at the end. Let me pull out that bag to kind of know where to fold it all along this edge here. So if you fold it now and make that crease with an iron, you can go ahead and fold it easily at the end. But for me, whenever I was trying to fold this, I kept getting lost and having to pull out the ruler to measure to make sure it was even. So I thought I'm going to avoid that this time and try Decaville Heavy. Whenever I'm folding, I'll definitely be able to feel that Decaville Heavy. Now, is this going to be good or bad? I don't know. We'll see. We're going to try it out and see if the Decaville Heavy is too much. But this is how it looks on the back right now. We have a layer here, another layer on top, and then the Decaville Heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this exterior piece, and as you remember, it's attached to the lining, and so I'm going to have the exterior right sides up. I'm going to match the center of my side piece and place it right sides down. You should probably, if you use a number 5 zipper, you'll probably have a little bit of overhang on both sides. My zipper should be that middle point. That center zipper should be the midway point. Go ahead and match it up. Check your ends to make sure you have about an even amount left on each side, or if you don't, at least make sure it's even on both sides. You want it to be even. Clip this in place. If you wanted, you could go ahead and clip your lining too, but I'm not going to. I'm going to baste first. Just because this is a long piece and I don't want to lose the seam or any other pieces, I'm going to take this one step at a time. So for the exterior, just going to be a basting stitch all the way down. I do see I have a little bit of overhang here on the base. That was just a mistake on my cutting, not a problem with the pattern, so I have to trim that up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this so I can get it all here on my sewing table, and I'm just going to start basting. I'm not worried about trimming up yet. I will do it at the end, and this is also why I said don't worry about basting this, because I'm going to cut it off, I know. I'm going to make sure those two edges are aligned and just baste all the way down. Here is that exterior attached, right sides together. Let's flip it over. Let's look at the lining. And on that same side we were just working on, now we're going to attach that lining long side piece. Again, we're going to match up the centers and have an even amount hanging on both sides, and then we're going to now sew all along this side with the full seam allowance in the pattern to attach all these pieces together. We are once again extending, so now we're just extending the side pieces. If you did make a crease, yours may look a little bit differently than mine. You would just have a folded edge. It would still be sewn the exact same way. This is definitely a part you want to interface really well. Those sides give you a lot of support, so don't skip on adding some type of stabilizer and reinforcement on these pieces. So again, let's look at this. You can see that my reinforcement is on the opposite edge of where I just sewed. That's the way I'm going to do it. I'm really not for sure if I needed to have it that way or if it should have been the other way. I felt like from the picture the pattern does not designate that, and from the picture it looked like this is the way she had it, so that's the way I'm doing it. It's the way I did the last one, so I think it'll be okay. Now what we're going to do is pull these two side pieces wrong sides together, just like this. I'm going to separate them, and then I'm going to top stitch all down this side piece. This is what I have at this point. This is still open, but what I want to do is I want to baste this closed, so just to make it easier when I sew later these pieces together. So go ahead and baste all the way down this raw edge, making sure you're having just a little bit of a tug on it so everything stays lined up. Then do the same thing with your other two long side pieces on this other side. So yours may be contrast, yours may not, but we want to go ahead and extend on both sides with those long pieces. After you do that, you can then baste down the bottom and trim up if you have any overhang like I do. I have both sides on to the main panel piece, so both long sides are on there, everything's basted into place, and then I have the bottom trimmed up. Now what we need to do is we need to add these handle connectors. I have my bag orientated to the side because it's really hard to show it all on camera where it's so long. I'm not going to be sewing these on camera just because, like I said, where it is so long I have to be very careful, and the angle of my camera makes it a little bit difficult. Here's the way the connector looks. You're going to take that raw edge and you're going to line it up with the bottom of this bag. This piece is going to be centered between these seams. So it's going to be, the center is going to be right on that bigger seam. It's a little tricky to sew because that makes it a little uneven. There is some extra bulk there. I suggest you either use a very skinny foot so that you can like be on the edge and sew it, or just go slow and be careful. I'm going to take that center and place it on there, and then I will actually glue mine down. You can use glue, double-sided tape, or pins. You really can't use clips because they can't reach. If you're using a vinyl, you definitely wouldn't want to use pins. Make sure that here's your middle zipper, that your connector is not too close to it. If it is, you've done a measurement wrong somewhere. That's kind of a common sense check to make sure they're not too close. And even when you're going up here, make sure that this is still in the middle of that seam. So the wrong side where that middle seam is, it'll actually be on this. So make sure you have everything looking good, that you do have the edges folded to the back. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew up one side across the top. I'm going to go right underneath that hardware so it kind of secures it in place, and then back down. If you wanted to add a rivet there, you could do that. I think it would be a little bit risky though, because you would be going through the seam. So for my personal thoughts, I would not suggest you add a rivet to this unless you feel really confident that it won't cause any problems with that seam, since you will be going through a connecting seam. You're going to sew these connectors on for 2 sides on the front, 2 sides on the back, so you will attach a total of 4 connectors. I'm going to attach all my connectors off camera, but when I come back, I'll have them all on, and then we will move on to the next step. I have all 4 of the connectors sewn on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this exterior right sides together, matching up this bottom edge with the other side. So you're looking at your lining. Everything should match up. I just kind of check my connectors, make sure they're looking good together. When you have that bottom clipped, you're going to sew from one edge to the other, back stitching when you start and stop, but note that this is a different seam allowance than what we have been doing the rest of the pattern, so make sure you check that. Once you have that bottom seam sewn, what you're going to do is you're going to make a small cut on the outside of that seam where those long sides are sewn. So here's your bottom panel, here is that long side, I'm looking at the lining, I'm going to make a snip here. What that's going to allow us to do is to open up this side piece so we can attach the side panels. So I just take my scissors in there and I am just going to cut that open, go through both layers. I'm not cutting through the stitches, just cutting up to it, so that should be able to be flared open now. Push that open and do the same thing over here on this other side. Now what you're going to do is you're going to flare those open. So you can see I see the exterior sides here, I'm on the lining, and I'm going to sew these down. So just stitch both of these lining pieces down. You're going to be careful to just get these 2 pieces stitched down. You don't want to get that exterior, or that top I should say, because it's exterior and lining, but you just want to get this bottom piece tacked down. Once you get to that edge, go ahead and pivot to sew all the way across there. Straighten it out. It'll take a few minutes to get it straightened out to make sure all that bulk is distributed properly. Sew down there. And that is how that looks. Now I'm going to tell you, this is going to stay a raw edge. We're going to bond over this, and you can see how thick that is. That's what I was talking about. You wouldn't want to, if you're sewing on a domestic, use anything besides cotton woven. But this stays raw edge. Now you do flip this back, so most of this gets covered, but there will be a part that will stay raw. Since I interface this, I'm not worried about it fraying so much. I'll trim up my threads and make sure that everything's covered on this piece. But I don't feel like it's going to unravel any. So that is how you do that. You do the same thing on this side. Flare this open and then sew it down. Also this side off camera. I'm not going to bind this bottom part now. I'm going to go ahead and attach the sides first, and then I'll bind the sides and the bottom all at the same time, and I'll bind them off camera. But what I'm going to do first is go ahead and sew this other side just like I did this one, and then I'm just going to clip the sides in place. I'm not going to sew them, we'll sew them together. But you will use this part as the bottom center, and then if you flatten it out, this will be the top center. For your sides, just use clips or make your marks on them to mark the centers, and place the right sides together and clip all the way around. So I'm going to clip both of those, finish everything up, and come back to show you how it looks clipped, and then we'll sew it together. I have both of the sides clipped all the way around. So we're looking at the lining, and we have these sides clipped right sides together with the exterior. This is going to be the part that I'm going to sew around. It's also going to be the part that I bind. So we will have to bind the bottom and these sides. I have both sides clipped. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing probably around this part right here. It's going to be hard for you to see. I'm going to try to show it as good as the best I can. But where this is big, it's just going to be hard to see. So we're going to start sewing here, and I'm going to go all the way around. I'm just going to do about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When I come in with the binding, I'll do the full seam allowance. If you are someone who likes to staple, it's a great place to staple. I do not do staples. Sometimes I glue, but I didn't do anything with this one. I just have it clipped. I'm going to have my hemostats handy, so if I need to pull things into the right space, I can do it. I'm going to smash everything down so I can get a good view here. Slip it underneath and then just start stitching. Definitely back stitch here, and I'm going to make for sure that I can see both sides, so I'm attaching everything all together. So I have this side basted into place. Like I said, I'll need to add the binding and then do the full seam allowance. I'm going to do that off camera, as well as sew and bind this side and the bottom. So when I come back, I will have everything done on the inside and turned right sides out. We'll still have to top stitch around this part here, and then we'll still have to add our handles too, but we're almost done. So I have everything finished and turned right sides out. I went ahead and completed one of the sides just to show you how it looks. You can see this is pushed in, have it top stitch all around. I have Decaville Heavy in here. Was it the best choice? I don't think so. I mean, it's really structured. It looks really nice, but I think next time I will use Decaville Light. On my first one, I used fleece and wasn't the most fond of it, but the Decaville Heavy is better than the fleece in my opinion, but I think Decaville Light will be the best choice. So this is how this side looks. Let's go ahead and look at the other side. This is how it looks when you first flip your bag out. You can see the difference there. This one definitely needs shaped. So the way you do it is the pattern tells you about how far to push this in. So you're just going to start pushing it in. If you did the pressing of this piece, and I didn't, then you don't have to worry as much about getting that proper shape on it, because that will already be pressed for you. So you can see that I'm just tucking that inside, and I'm going to put a clip here to hold it in place, and I'm just going to go around the rest of the side piece to do this. Just pushing and tucking it in. Whenever I have it all the way around, I'll check to make sure it's the right measurement that it's supposed to be to make sure everything's good. The good thing about the Decaville Heavy though is it does let you get a really good crease on it, and it kind of holds its shape a little bit better. So that part was much better than the fleece for sure. So here's how this other side looked. I have it clipped around, maybe not perfectly clipped even, but good enough. Let me check this side. Yeah. So with the Decaville Heavy, it is much trickier to sew. I need to push this side out. I can tell it's a little bit too pushed in. It's got a lot more bulk. I don't recommend it. Honestly, I suggest just using the Decaville Light. This is going to make for some really bulky seams, but the way we're going to sew it is we're just going to get it underneath here. If you have a cylinder arm, of course you could sew from the exterior, but since I don't, I've got to sew from the wrong side. So what I do is I'm just going to go all around this edge here, so 1/8 of an inch away all the way around, just like I did on this one, to lock in those stitches and to just give it a nice finished look. My bottom is extremely thick. I will not be surprised if I break a needle. I'm going to try to hand crank it just to go through it. That is my fault with the Decaville Heavy for sure. Yeah, if I wouldn't have hand cranked, that definitely would have broken a needle. So I can safely say I would not use the Decaville Heavy, even though I like the way it feels and the finished look. Just too much bulk. Regardless of the hard work you put into this bag, this is gorgeous. Look at that shape. It's just a really gorgeous bag. It's kind of rolly, which is kind of fun even. Super cute. Now the only thing I have left to do is to add those handles. I'm just slipping them on. I'm making sure that the raw edge, and if you wanted you could fold that again, I just don't care, is going to be on the inside. So I'll actually glue and sew these. The pattern does tell you that rivets are a good place to use here, and they really are. It's just I'm not going to use rivets on this side since I didn't use rivets on the other side, but you definitely can. I am not sewing up my handles on here. You guys know how to sew handles. I'm a little tired. It has taken me several hours to finish this bag. Am I sad about it? No. It's a really cute pattern. Definitely some tricky spots. You will have some extra bulk at the bottom. You will have a small area that is an unfinished seam. Do use the Decaville Light here. I probably could use a little bit of interfacing here at the top, but it's still not bad. I don't think I would change it, but I can see where someone would want to change it. But this is how this pattern looks. This is the Jules from Lacus Design. I did use the watercolor rose print from Mormino. This zipper tape is from So Majestic. The lining fabric is from Jana Edwards. Let's go ahead and grab out that other one. And they both are gorgeous bags. Let's see if I can get them both on camera. These are two really gorgeous bags. The pattern's a fun pattern, definitely a skill builder. I put in probably between both cutting, sewing, interfacing on both of these, I would say 2, maybe 3 solid days on it. So this isn't a bag that you're just going to cut and sew in the evening. It needs to be maybe cut and interface one day and then sew the next. But a wonderful pattern. I love Sylvie. I love her patterns, and this one's definitely one of her more detail specific patterns. If you have any questions about the pattern, let me know, or reach out to Sylvie herself. She has a Facebook group, and I will link the Facebook group, the pattern, and where I got the fabrics. These fabrics I think are from Oh So Lovely, if I remember correctly, and this is just from my local quilt shop. But this was a fun sew. Thank you so much for joining me for another tutorial, and I hope today in your sewing room that you're able to sew something that you have to put a little more effort in today, and that whenever you're done you are proud of yourself and you just end up with an amazing bag. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.